30 tons of bronze, 45 feet around, 16,000 gallons of standing water, balanced on the backs of 12 metal bulls, and every ounce of it poured in a single unbroken stream of liquid fire that could not stop, could not pause, and could not fail. But here is what almost no one tells you. The numbers the Bible records for this object do not add up. Read its width, the distance around it, and the water it held with a calculator in your hand, and something is wrong, unless the men who built it understood something we have since forgotten. This is the story of the Bronze Sea, and the real mystery is hiding inside its measurements. It is the 10th century before Christ, and Jerusalem is rising into the most ambitious building project the Kingdom of Israel has ever attempted. The Temple of Solomon, a house for the God who made the heavens, set on a hill above the city. In the courtyard of that temple, before the priests can climb the steps to the altar, there sits a basin so large it has its own name. The Bible does not call it a tank. It does not call it a bowl, or a font, or a cistern. It calls it the sea. And trailing behind it across 3,000 years are three mysteries that scholars, rabbis, and engineers still argue about today. How much water did it really hold? Because two passages of Scripture give two different answers. How did its builders square a circle that, on paper, should not square? And how did anyone in the early Iron Age pour 30 tons of molten bronze in one continuous shot without the whole thing tearing itself apart as it cooled? Most people, when they hit those apparent contradictions, assume the Bible simply got the math wrong. But what few people know is that every one of those errors turns out to be a doorway. And what waits on the other side tells us the men who built this thing understood their craft and their God far better than we ever gave them credit for. The sun comes up over the courtyard. The bronze catches the first light and burns like a second dawn. A priest crosses the courtyard at first light, and the closer he comes to it, the smaller he feels. By the time he stands at its base, the rim of the basin is more than 1.5 feet above the top of his head. It is 15 feet across, wider than most rooms he has ever stood in. It is the better part of 20 paces just to walk around it. And it does not sit on the ground. It rests on the backs of 12 oxen cast in bronze, life-sized, frozen mid-stride, arranged in 4 groups of 3. 3 face north, 3 face west, 3 face south, 3 face east. Their heads point outward to the 4 corners of the earth, and their hindquarters turn inward, shoulder to shoulder, bearing the weight of the sea on their backs. The book of 1 Kings records the dimensions like an engineer's blueprint. 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. 10 cubits, about 15 feet, the width of the thing. And his height was 5 cubits, 7.5 feet of bronze and water standing in the open air. And a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about, 45 feet around. It reads less like a poem and more like a specification sheet, because that is exactly what it is. The ox, in the world of ancient Israel, was the very symbol of strength and tireless service. Much increase is by the strength of the ox, says the book of Proverbs. 12 of them, one perhaps for each tribe of Israel, set their shoulders beneath the weight of worship and did not move. And the rim of the basin flared outward, shaped like the lip of a cup or the petals of a lily in bloom. Beneath it ran 2 unbroken rows of ornamental gourds, hundreds of them, circling the entire 45-foot perimeter. We will come back to how those were made, because it is almost unbelievable. For now, understand this. That flared lily rim was not only beautiful. A wide tank full of water pushes outward on its own walls, and over time those walls bow and warp. The flared rim and the rows of gourds beneath it locked the whole circle in place. A reinforcing band of solid bronze, hoop strength engineered into something that looked, to the priest standing below, like a flower. He has come to do one small thing: to wash his hands and his feet before he serves his God. And to do it, he stands in the shadow of 16,000 gallons of water held in 30 tons of bronze. One human being, dwarfed by an ocean, raised up on the backs of bulls. Have you ever stood at the foot of something so vast it made you feel like a rumor of a person? He fills his hands. The water is cold, and he has no idea that the numbers describing the basin above him have not stopped troubling people for 3,000 years. 2 verses, 1 object, 2 different answers. The Bible describes the Bronze Sea twice, once in 1 Kings, once in 2 Chronicles, and on nearly every detail, the 2 accounts agree perfectly. Same width, same height, same distance around. But when they reach the question of how much water the basin held, they split. 1 Kings 7:26 says the sea contained 2,000 baths. Turn to 2 Chronicles 4:5 and it says the basin received and held 3,000 baths. A bath was the standard Hebrew measure for liquid, roughly 8 gallons. So one passage says 16,000 gallons. The other says 24,000. That is a gap of 8,000 gallons, describing the exact same basin, with the exact same width and the exact same height. So, did the Bible just contradict itself? For centuries, scholars have offered answers, and they stack up in a fascinating way. The simplest is a copying error. In ancient Hebrew, numbers were written as letters, and the letter that stands for 3 looks remarkably like the letter that stands for 2, a single stroke apart. On a worn scroll, with faded ink and a small tear in the parchment, one careful scribe could read a 3 where the original had a 2, and the mistake would travel down the centuries in every copy made afterward. A smudge, a slip of the eye. It happens. But there is a subtler answer hiding in the original language, the kind of thing English translation quietly erases. 1 Kings uses a plain verb. The sea held, yakil, 2,000 baths. 2 Chronicles uses a heavier, more emphatic phrase. It received and held. And the added Hebrew word, machazik, carries the sense of utmost capacity, the absolute most a thing can contain. Read that way, the contradiction dissolves. 1 Kings is telling you the working level, how much water the priests actually kept in it, filled about 2/3 of the way so it would not slosh over the rim during the day. 2 Chronicles is telling you the maximum, what it would hold if you filled it to the very top of that lily lip. One number is the everyday, the other is the absolute limit. Both are true. And there is one more answer, more elegant than either, and it depends on the shape of the basin's floor, which Scripture never specifies. A round-bottomed bowl and a straight-walled cylinder of the same width and height hold different amounts of water, and a cylinder holds exactly 1.5 times what the bowl holds. 2,000 multiplied by 1.5 is 3,000. One writer may have pictured a bowl, the other a cylinder. Same object, 2 models, 2 numbers that were never really at war. 3 answers to a problem most readers never even noticed. But here is the thing. The water was the smaller crack. The real puzzle was never how much the sea held. It was hiding in the shape of a perfect circle. Set a measuring line against a circle 10 cubits wide, and basic geometry tells you exactly how far it should reach around. The number that connects the width of any circle to the distance around it is one of the most famous in mathematics. We call it pi. It is a little more than 3.14159, and on forever, never repeating. Multiply the width of a circle by pi, and you get its circumference. Every circle, always, no exceptions. So take the bronze C. The text says it is 10 cubits across. 10 times pi is about 31.4. The distance around it should be a little over 31 cubits. But 1 Kings says the line that compassed it roundabout measured exactly 30. Not 31 and a fraction, 30. Run the numbers backward, and the Bible appears to be using a value for pi of exactly 3. Crude, rounded, wrong by a noticeable margin. And it is not as if no one could do better. The Babylonians of the same era used a sharper value. So did the Egyptians. So for centuries, skeptics have pointed at this single verse and said the obvious thing. The Bible flunked geometry. But watch what happens when you stop treating the bronze C as a drawing on a page and start treating it as what it actually was. A massive, three-dimensional object that real surveyors had to measure with real rope. How do you measure the width of a giant basin? You lay your line across the top, from the outer edge of one rim to the outer edge of the other, outside to outside. How do you measure the distance around? The natural place to run your rope is along the inside, around the basin where the water actually sits. And between the outer edge and the inner wall, there is bronze, because 1 Kings tells us the sea was an handbreadth thick, a solid band of metal all the way around. Subtract the thickness of two opposing walls from that 10-cubit outer width, and the inner circle the water fills is not 10 cubits across. It is closer to 9 2/3. Run the math on that, and the value of pi that comes out is no longer 3. It climbs to about 3.10, and with a slightly longer royal cubit, closer still. And that single fact changes everything about how we read this verse. The error was never an error. It was the difference between measuring the outside of a real object and the inside of it. The men who shaped this basin were not bad at geometry. They were precise about a thing that had a wall, and the people who accused them of ignorance were the ones reading a flat diagram where a three-dimensional masterpiece had once stood. And then there is a stranger claim, and I want to be careful with it, because it sits in the realm of tradition rather than proof. In the Hebrew text of 1 Kings 7:23, the word for measuring line is spelled with one extra silent letter, written one way but read aloud another, a reading anomaly preserved by the scribes who guarded every stroke. Assign the Hebrew letters their traditional numerical values, take the ratio between the written spelling and the spoken one, and multiply the plain biblical 3 by that ratio. The result, according to a tradition tied to the Vilna Gaon and laid out by Rabbi Max Munk in 1962, comes out to 3.1415. Pi, accurate to 4 decimal places, supposedly folded into the spelling of a single word. Is it real? Some treasure it as a hidden signature. Others call it numerical coincidence, a pattern found because someone went looking. I will not tell you it is proof of anything, but even the cautious, provable answer, the simple fact of a wall a handbreadth thick, is enough to overturn the whole accusation by itself. How many things have you been absolutely certain were broken, only to discover, years later, that you were the one who had been reading them wrong? Now hold that thought, because the deepest mystery of the Bronze Sea is not in its numbers at all. It is in the fire it took to make it. Far to the south, where the desert turns the color of rust and the heat shimmers off bare rock. Men were tearing copper out of the ground. This is the wilderness of the Araba, the mines of Timna and the valleys beyond, and the slag heaps still lying in that desert today, dated to exactly this period, prove the scale of what happened there. Furnaces breathed day and night. Smoke rose off the hills, and green copper ore came out of the rock in quantities no single building project had any business demanding, because 30 tons of bronze does not appear from nowhere. But copper alone is soft. To make bronze hard enough to hold an ocean, the smiths needed tin. And tin was rare, found almost nowhere in the region. So it came by sea. Phoenician ships carried it across open water from distant shores, hull after hull, to be married to Israelite copper in a furnace at the edge of the world. The Bronze Sea was an international undertaking before a single drop of metal was ever poured. And there was one man Solomon trusted to bring it all together. His name was Huram-Abi, half Israelite, half Phoenician, summoned from the city of Tyre, the greatest center of metalwork in the ancient world. He had given his whole life to bronze. He had cast pillars and pots and ornaments beyond counting, but he had never been asked to do anything like this. One basin, 30 tons, cast in a single, unbroken pour. And he did not build it in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had no room and no clay for such a thing. The book of 1 Kings records the strange detail plainly. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, in the clay ground between Sukkoth and Zarthan. Why there? Because that stretch of the Jordan Valley had the three things a giant foundry could not live without. The river for water, endless water to cool metal and to mix clay by the ton. The valley's own shape, which funneled the wind down its length like a natural bellows, fanning the furnaces hotter than human lungs ever could. And the clay itself, a thick, stubborn marl found in that ground and almost nowhere else, the one material on Earth that could be packed into a mold large enough and tough enough to survive what was coming. That same clay is prized by craftsmen in Jerusalem for casting to this very day. The valley was chosen the way a surgeon chooses an operating room. Nothing about it was an accident. Huram-Abi walked the length of the mold one more time in the heat, checking the inner core, the heart of the whole thing, for any hairline crack. One seam, one cold streak where the metal meets and refuses to join, and all of it is scrap. He had seen smaller castings fail for less. He pressed his hand flat against the clay and felt how dry it was, how ready. The heat off that clay, baked hard by the valley sun, was nothing next to what would come, because the furnaces were almost ready. The crucibles glowed white. There is a kind of moment that asks everything of you at once, where months of work narrow down to a few minutes that you will either get right or never get back. Huram-Abi was about to live inside one. For weeks, the mold had taken shape the way the great bronzes were always made. First, a core of clay in the rough shape of the basin, over it a skin of wax, and into that wax every detail was carved by hand. The flare of the lily rim, the hundreds of gourds running in their 2 long rows. Then the whole thing was buried in more clay and baked until the wax inside ran out through narrow channels and left behind a hollow shell, a perfect bronze-shaped emptiness, waiting. And here is the detail that should stop us. Those hundreds of gourds were not made separately and soldered on later. Scripture says it without fanfare. They were cast when the sea was cast. Every ornament, every petal of that lily lip formed in the same instant as the basin itself, from the same river of metal. One pour, one object, no joints. Now the furnaces roared. Not one furnace, many linked together, the valley wind screaming through them, the bellows working, the heat past 1,000 degrees, hot enough to turn solid bronze into something that moved like water and glowed like the sun. 30 tons of it. And the law of the thing was absolute, and it was terrifying. Once the metal began to flow, it could not stop. A pause meant a seam. A seam meant a weak line where the first wave of bronze had begun to cool before the next one arrived. And a weak line, under the weight of 16,000 gallons of water, meant the whole sea would one day split. To make it sound, every ounce had to pour as one continuous stream, all the furnaces feeding the mold at once, faster than the metal could cool. There was no second attempt at this. There was only the pour. The channels were opened. The bronze came. Hurram-Abi watched the fire run into the earth and vanish into the shell. And there was nothing left to do but watch. And one word ran through him like a prayer. Hold. Just hold. The molds, buried deep in the valley clay, took the outward push of all that liquid metal and did not burst. Think about what was inside that pour for him. Not just metal, months of his life. Every dry day of mold building, every night checking the core, every furnace stoked to the edge of failure, all of it riding on a few minutes he could never repeat. If it cracked, there was no fixing it. You did not patch a 30-ton casting. You broke it apart and began again from nothing. One chance. And somewhere in that fire, the thing Hurram-Abi had been chasing his whole life quietly changed shape. He had come to make the greatest object in the ancient world, to put his name on a wonder. But that is not what this is. I am making a place for a man to be clean before he meets his God. The metal was never the point. The water it would hold was the point. The wonder was only a vessel for something he could not cast and could never own. Months later, the molds were shattered, and the bronze sea rose for the first time in the courtyard of the temple in Jerusalem. And the priests came to use it. All of it, the tonnage, the mathematics, the fire that nearly broke a master craftsman, for water. That is the part that can catch you off guard. After everything it took to build, the Bronze Sea existed to do something almost humble. It held the water the priests used to wash. But do not mistake humble for small. The command behind it came straight from God, generations earlier, in the book of Exodus. The priests were to wash their hands and their feet before they approached the altar, and the warning attached to it was severe. They were to do it, the text says, that they die not. Do you understand what that means? This was not a courtesy. It was not hygiene. To come before a holy God with unwashed hands was to risk your life. The water in that basin stood between a man and death every single day he served. And the sea did not work alone. From its great reservoir, water fed 10 smaller bronze basins on wheels, used to rinse the sacrifices. Now, 16,000 gallons sitting open under the Middle Eastern sun would have gone foul and green within days. So many scholars believe the truth was more sophisticated still. Fresh water channeled in from pools to the south kept moving, kept living, cycling through the basin so it never went stagnant. Living water in the truest sense, in the very heart of the temple. But here is the detail that turns this whole story on its head. The reason it was never called a tank, or a font, or a bowl. They called it the sea. In the world of the ancient Near East, the sea was not a peaceful thing. The sea was chaos. The sea was the dark, formless deep that the surrounding nations feared. The untamed water that swallowed ships and ruled by terror. The symbol of everything wild and beyond human control. It is the same deep the Bible describes at the very beginning, when the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved over the waters and brought order out of the dark. So picture what Israel did. They took the sea, chaos itself, the deep that every other nation worshipped or dreaded, and they cast it in bronze, and they bolted it to the floor of God's house, and they made the priests wash in it. They turned the terror of the world into a basin of cleansing in the courtyard of the Lord. Every single day, in metal and water, they declared one thing without saying a word. Our God rules the chaos. The deep does not rule him. The water cycled, the priests washed. The bronze caught the morning light year after year for nearly 4 centuries. Then came the torches on the walls. It was 586 before Christ. The army of Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar, had broken through the walls of Jerusalem after a siege that starved the city from the inside. The Temple of Solomon, the house that had taken 7 years and the wealth of a kingdom to build, was burning. And the soldiers of Babylon moved through it room by room, stripping it of everything that could be carried. They came to the Bronze Sea. And here, the genius of Hiram Abi's work became its own kind of curse. The basin was too vast, too heavy, too perfectly whole to lift and haul back to Babylon as a trophy. 30 tons of seamless bronze, raised on 12 bulls. You could not carry it. So they broke it. The Bible records the moment without flinching. The pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases and the brazen sea that was in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldees break in pieces, and carried the brass of them to Babylon. Break in pieces. The single continuous pour that Hiram Abi had risked everything to keep whole, the masterpiece with no joints, no seams, nothing for a weakness to hide in, was taken apart with hammers and chisels, hacked into fragments small enough to load onto carts. Imagine a Levite among the captives, a man who had washed at that basin 1,000 times, watching the soldiers swing iron against the bronze. He hears it, the ring of metal that took the fire of 100 furnaces to make, splitting under foreign hammers. They are taking the sea. He cannot stop them. He cannot look away. The chaos that Israel had once bolted to the floor of God's house was loose again, and it wore the faces of Babylon's soldiers. And when it was done, the prophet Jeremiah recorded the most chilling detail of all. The bronze they carried off, from the sea, the 12 oxen, the great pillars, was so much that, in his words, it was without weight. Beyond weighing, a wonder that 30 tons of metal and the labor of a nation had produced, now nothing but raw bronze on wagons, too much to count, rolling east toward Babylon. The sea that once ruled the chaos had been broken by it. The courtyard stood empty. Where the morning light had burned on bronze for 400 years, there was only scorched stone and silence. The bronze is gone. It was melted down, most likely, somewhere in Babylon, reforged into coins or weapons or idols. The greatest casting of the ancient world, scattered and unmade. If the story ended there, it would be a tragedy, and nothing more. But the story does not end there. Centuries later, on a prison island called Patmos, an old man named John was given a vision of heaven, the throne room of God itself. And among everything he saw, he describes one thing that should make every reader of this story sit up. Before the throne, he writes, there was a sea of glass mingled with fire. A sea. Not chaos this time, not dark, not raging, not threatening. A sea gone perfectly still, clear as glass, lit from within, resting in peace before the very face of God. Do you see it? The earthly bronze sea was always pointing past itself. It was a chaos the priests had to contain with 30 tons of metal, water they had to keep moving so it would not rot, a cleansing that had to be repeated every single day, and could still be shattered by an enemy with hammers. But the heavenly sea is the thing the bronze one was only ever a shadow of. Chaos, finally and fully stilled. A cleansing that never wears off. A purity no army can carry away to Babylon. The basin could be broken. What it pointed to cannot. And maybe that is the quiet lesson buried in all this bronze and mathematics. Some of the things we lose, the things we were so sure we could not live without, turn out to have been signposts all along, pointing at something that could never be taken from us. So let me leave you with a question to sit with. The bronze sea was a doorway, not a trophy. A thing whose entire purpose was to point beyond itself to a cleansing only God could give. What in your own life are you holding on to as a trophy that was only ever meant to be a doorway? If this story moved you, if the mystery of the numbers, the fire of that impossible pour, or the sea before the throne stirred something in you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves the place where scripture and history meet. And tell me in the comments, of all the answers to the riddle of the numbers, the wall a handbreadth thick, the geometry of bowl and cylinder, or the hidden code in a single Hebrew word, which one do you find the most convincing? The bronze was carried off to Babylon, but the sea it pointed to is still there, before the throne, clear as glass and still as light. And it is waiting.